Welcome to another installment of Jesus and Anger. I'm Michael L. Dublin, Sr., pastor for South Central Church of Christ in Raleigh, North Carolina. At South Central, we have been unpacking Jesus and anger, looking at all the principles that Jesus has taught us, and then looking at some examples of how we move from one place to the other. Our session is very practical, or should I say sessions are very practical. We're talking about a real transformation that allows us to transcend from the people that we were when we were called into Christ to who we're going to become. There is a well-known figure in the Bible, Peter, and anywhere you go, even Catholics whose theology is different than mine see him as the first pope. And they have monumental monuments of him in Rome. And all of that, there was an illustration of how well he's known anywhere in the world. But what I love about Peter is that one day Jesus saw him fishing and called him. Peter was that kind of guy who's impulsive. He said what was on his mind. He's very real. He's very honest. And his mouth and his actions always got him into trouble. When you talk about anger, he was a guy that demonstrated he had some issues with anger when he pulled out his sword to cut off the servant's ear. But things he said, that was just his character. Now, the scriptures rarely give us a demonstration of somebody's physical appearance, but it talks about their character development. And so we want to encourage you today to think in terms of nature, natural to spiritual. And overcoming our anger, God calls us in our natural state into a spiritual state in which he develops us and transforms us. One illustration we have of Peter is on a boat late at night, and he sees Jesus coming walking on the water. And he says, everybody's frightened that it's Jesus. He said, but if that really is you, tell me to come to you. And Jesus said, come. Peter begins to walk on the water, but then he sees the wind. He's terrified by the circumstances. He begins to sink, and he says, Lord, save me. And of course, Jesus saves him, and he rebukes him mildly because of his lack of faith. Each one of us have a difficult time thinking in terms of getting off a boat and walking in water. But his nature was such that that's what caused him to do what he had done. Your nature, my nature, is also the reason why we do much of what we do. So perhaps your nature isn't to get off the boat and to walk on the water, but in your anger, your belief about yourself, your thoughts about yourself, and your experience, and those impulsive decisions will not allow you to think things through. Peter jumped in the water, but he said, Lord, save me. How many times have you jumped into a relationship that you thought you could handle? You had even prayed about it, like he said, if that's you, then tell me to come to you. But you made that decision based on your impulsivity, on the basis of your anger and other things that you've had to face. How many times have you gotten into financial situations where you went and bought something that you could not possibly pay for? How many times have you said things or done things? And again, getting back to the relationships, and that's where most of us have our problems. I shared with the congregation that God tells us not to get involved with adulterous relationships because people get into them thinking that it's going to be about one thing, and then it becomes something else totally different. The key to Peter's success, though, is that he says, Lord, save me. He knew that by his very nature, he could not save himself. He could get himself into it, but he could not save himself. So we want to encourage you to remember this principle. God will transform you from where you were to where he wants you to be. And when you get in trouble, and you're going to get in trouble, you must call out and say, God, save me. But you got to call out from the core of your being. Not save me so I can do the same thing, but save me as a part of your transformation, as a part of your transcendence in me, so that I can be the person that can one day write a letter that everybody else can read. It may never be 1st and 2nd Peter, but your letter's still going to be written, because your life, your legacy, and your testimony will all be about the transformation that God has done when you yielded to him. Jesus over anger and all of our characteristics. So on this day, we want to encourage you that you're going to move from the very natural state of who you are until that which God is going to make you, and you need to stay like Peter did through all of it, so that you'll see the results of what the Most High God will do in your life. God bless you. Take the challenge.